Okay, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. So, I'm Nick Sheppard, for the avoidance of doubt, that's Tanya. I'm from the University of Leeds, I'm Research Advisor. So I'm going to do a quick introduction. Tanya's going to talk about the more interesting stuff that we've done. So this is about our co-creation experiment that visually opens through our Knowledge Equity and Open Scholarship Week that we run towards the end of May. That doesn't look good. Very good. So to give you a bit of background first for the Knowledge Equity Network, or KEN for short. So the Knowledge Equity Network was founded or co-founded by the University of Leeds and the University of Pretoria in South Africa in 2022. The Declaration on Knowledge Equity was launched the following year in 2023, and that was developed in discussion with partners across the globe, really to ensure that it's globally relevant. The ambition, really, a lot of what sort of Caroline was talking about in her keynote, to foster a culture where equity, collaboration and openness are paramount, to bring people together to work in partnership, institutions, organisations, so not just higher education institutions, but other funders and Wikimedia UK, for example. Again, Caroline was talking about Wikipedia, and Wikimedia UK were one of the first organisations we engaged with and actually contribute to that declaration. And also other networks and individuals across the world. You can sign as an individual if you follow that QR code. I think that should take you to the declaration. Have a look at that. It's probably in need of an update, but have a look, and if you are agree with its principles, then please do consider signing. Those numbers are actually slightly out of date after Knowledge Equity and Open Scholarship Week, or CHAOS for short. And unfortunately, we've got 462 individuals now. I think we're still at 28 higher education institutions. We're up to 53 organisations and representation across 71 countries. And really, we're trying to build a network, or what I'm sort of increasingly thinking of as human infrastructure, you know, to build a sort of more equitable access to knowledge. So that's the Knowledge Equity Network. And then we decided to do, perhaps yet another Open Research Week. I mean, no disrespect to the great Open Research Weeks are out there. So Cass, part of the organisation committee for Liverpool Open Research Week, as it calls. I've been to that for that's been running for several years. It's great. And there's one at Sheffield as well, Open Fest in September. We wanted to do something slightly different, just because we didn't want to be yet another sort of same sort of thing that we've done, people already doing very well. So we wanted to do something that was a bit more focused explicitly on open knowledge equity, and to bring in the Knowledge Equity Network partners to be more sort of slightly more international in flavour. So it was a partnership between the University of Leeds and the University of Pretoria, which, as I say, were those founding institutions for the co-founders for the network itself, along with Salford, where Tanya is obviously based. University of Utrecht in the Netherlands, who are another KEN signatory. I'll have to look at these because I can't say them without looking. There was the Mohamed Lamine de Gaban University, Sétif II in Algeria, the Université de Suisse in Tunisia, and as I say, Utrecht University in the Netherlands. So the six of us sort of got together and organised what we came to be known as Knowledge Equity and Open Scholarship Week. So the programme, I say it was only 3 days actually, but there were 7 sessions over those 3 days. So it was Knowledge Equity and Open Scholarship Week just towards the end of May. That QR code will take you to the programme. So we're still trying to get the recordings up. Everything was recorded. I don't think they're up yet. We're still sort of but there will be recordings of all the sessions up there. And they were very panel-based rather than individual speakers. So we're trying to be a bit more discursive, etc. So as I say, you can see sort of some of the areas we were focusing on, some of the things we've been talking about today. And a big focus was Tanya's idea, I think, initially was what we called our co-creation experiment. So I shall pass over to you, Tanya, to talk a bit more about it.
Can you hear me okay? Yeah, great. So thanks, Nick. So just to say a little bit more about the Knowledge Equity and Open Scholarship Week before I move on. We decided quite early on that we were going to use the Spark Europe's paper called Connecting the Opens. It was a position paper as our inspiration. So we made the theme of the whole week about the idea of connecting the different types of opens. So open science, open research, open access, open pedagogy, open educational resources, and try to find a way to start a discussion around connecting those together, which we didn't think had been done. So that was the focus of the week. So as Nick said, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the co-creation experiment that we designed. And one of the intentions of the Knowledge Equity and Open Scholarship Week was to really put knowledge equity and this idea of bridging or connecting the opens into actual practice. So rather than inviting the same speakers that we often see, actually really trying to find a way to physically or digitally bridge the opens. So in the past, I'd had some experience with the IFLA International Librarians Networking Programme. And I'd also, as a health librarian in the past, had experience of randomised coffee trials where you are matched, sometimes randomly, sometimes a bit more by design, with people that you've never met before. And it always seemed to spark some really interesting, fresh and diverse conversations and connections, and unexpected things happened. So I decided to try and use that prior experience to sort of design a co-creation experiment for Knowledge Equity and Open Scholarship Week. We also wanted to really decentralise the UK perspective. Ken is global. And so we wanted to make sure that we weren't just operating from a position where the UK, with all our language privilege and all our resource privilege, decided that we had all the answers. We absolutely don't. So we wanted to position ourselves alongside our colleagues from other countries, all as learners. So that's what the co-creation experiment intended to do. We decided to frame it as an experiment so that we could sort of operate with a more sort of open, hopeful approach to the uncertainty. We thought that rather than trying to plan everything, we would open ourselves up to having diverse outcomes that an experiment has. So you start with this rationale and this intention, and then you design your experiment and you just let it run and see what happens. So that's why we sort of framed it as an experiment. We had to get really comfortable with the unknowns and the number of questions that we had, and be okay with that and not actually try to control things too much. Saying that, co-creation really does benefit from a structure and from resources and a timeline. So that's where we invested our focus to begin with. You can see the timeline at the top starts with a very long process of trying to define the activity, the eligibility, and the intended outcomes of the co-creation experiment. But then that only really left us with a worryingly short amount of time to actually deliver the co-creation experiment. So we opened the invitation to participants for 2 weeks. We matched our groups over the course of a week. And then from introducing the matched participants to each other, having them meet with each other, plan their contribution. So we asked them to create a contribution around the prompt of bridging the opens. We then had them deliver that contribution to us within 4 weeks, which is really quite a tight turnaround when you think these people had never met before. We gave ourselves a week to review and publish the contributions on the Ken website, and then the Knowledge Equity and Open Scholarship Week then flowed from there. And that's where we facilitated them sharing their contributions and also facilitated their reflections of the experiment itself. I've also included on the slide there in the boxes all the different types of resources or artifacts that we created in order to provide the structure for our participants and the facilitators to really keep us on track and make sure that everybody knew what to expect. It's not really enough to say, we're going to co-create something, go for it. People do need a little bit of support and structure to understand what's expected, how long they've got to play with, and what the output, or as we called it, contribution, how that needs to look. So we devised lots of different artifacts, right from how we were going to invite people and explore their expressions of interests, and also created an image, which you saw on the previous slide, right through to sort of planning, documentation. But I think the most significant artifact or resource that we created was the participation and production guide, which outlined for the participants exactly what was expected, all of the different formats that they could use, the different licenses they could choose, and also gave them some prompts to get them like over that first hurdle of, well, what we're going to talk about. So yeah, and then obviously we had to devise how we were going to share all of the contributions as part of the programme and on the Ken website. The participation and production guide has now been remade as an open educational resource, and that's now shared on OER Commons. So if you want to have a look at that, you can find it on there. And that will mean that if we decide to iterate the co-creation experiment again, we've got it all there. Or if anyone else wants to iterate this experiment, they can just use that. It's licensed to be reused. So in terms of what happened, in some numbers, we had 24 participants sign up for the co-creation, and we arranged them into 8 groups of 3 participants. 5 of the groups co-created contributions to the programme in advance, and 1 delivered their contribution to the programme live as a presentation. We designed 2 sessions within the Knowledge Equity and Open Scholarship Week programme. The first one was a co-creation spotlight, where we did exactly that. We spotlighted what the small groups created in terms of their contributions. They had the chance to share, to give like a 5-minute presentation if they wanted to. Otherwise, we could just display what it was that they created together. And we had 10 speakers, so quite unlike most open research or other types of sharing weeks that we see around. We had a lot of speakers in the session. The second session was a co-creation reflection. And in this one, rather than showcasing the contributions and the discussions, we focused on reflecting on the experiment. What did it do to their ability to share knowledge? How did they feel included in the programme? And how did they sort of experience working in a co-creative way? We had participants from 11 countries, so you can see from the map, from Canada right over to India in the east. So a really wide range of time zones to grapple with, which was a fun challenge. I'm not going to read all of these, but this is the list of the co-created contributions that our groups created in that 4-week period where we ran the experiment. I really encourage you to scan the QR code, and that will take you to the Ken website, where you can read, view, and hopefully at some point listen to the co-created contributions. So we matched people who were working in different opens, had different expertise, whether that was open education, open research, or open access. We had a mixture of practitioners, librarians, doctoral students, professors and academics as well. So really, really interesting, diverse contributions. You'll see as well that we had a couple of groups that didn't manage to create a contribution. We always knew that that was an acceptable outcome of the experiment, that some people just wouldn't be able to work within that time frame. They wouldn't be able to arrange to meet, and that was okay. So we've just left them with encouragement to keep their connections going and to come back to the possibility of working with their partners again in future on their own timeline. I'm hoping this will just run. Yeah, so in terms of what tips the scale in favour of making co-creation work and what makes it challenging, you can see some things coming up on the screen there. Hopefully that'll come up. So I definitely think that we have a lot of what it takes to make co-creation work. Our shared values, our attention to designing the experiment and creating the conditions and facilitating the participation and so on. I'm not going to read them all out because I'll run out of time. In terms of those icons at the top, some important things that are also useful for making co-creation work. The first one is trust. So that's trust between the facilitators and the participants, but also between the participants themselves. They all need to use those shared values and believe in each other, that they're going to be treated with respect and that we're going to do what we say we're going to do. Obviously, technology really, really helped us to work across geographies. And also support. So we benefited from the support of Professor Chrissy Naranci at the University of Leeds, who's a professor in creative and open education. And she was really supportive of us trying this out as an experiment. And she really helped to infect us with the co-creation bug, if you like. In terms of what makes it challenging, I'm sure you can imagine what makes working across time zones with people who've never met each other, things like language and cultural differences, connectivity issues, but also just scheduling and working across time zones. That makes global co-creation really difficult, but not doable. I watched back the recording of the session where the participants reflected on their experiences, and it made me think about what else we learned. So not just what you need in place to make co-creation work, but what we learned about this, having experimented with co-creation. I think the main thing is that you just have to trust the process. You've designed something, you don't know what's going to happen, it might not work. Trust it and accept that there will be diverse outcomes, and that includes failure or something unexpected happening. I think we learned that there are potential participants out there who are appreciative and willing to take part in co-creation. We didn't know if there were until we put the call out. Turns out there were. And one thing I've personally taken away is that if you create the conditions for collaboration, it's as useful to our communities as just talking to them, or as just providing a platform, like an open platform. Those things are really useful too. But if you make the conditions where collaboration is expected and you give them a framework, then that's so useful to them. They're desperate to talk to each other and they just don't know how to do it. One thing that surprised us was that having such a limited time commitment, we thought that was going to be a problem for people, but actually we heard feedback that it was really helpful to have a tight time frame, so people knew that they were what they were committing to and that they could manage it. So 4 weeks seemed to be okay for people. Yeah, we modelled transparency, we stayed consistent to our values, and some of our participants loved that we created what they called a permeable programme, so that the programme itself was open to them to put into it what they wanted. We didn't control what they put into it. And finally, a really great suggestion that we had, if we do iterate the experiment, is that we should consider signposting open rather than proprietary digital tools for collaboration. And that's something that I certainly need to learn about, so that we're not expecting all of our global participants to have access to those same paid for proprietary tools that we're so used to working with in the UK. So I think that's everything I wanted to say. So back to Nick.
Yeah, so what we learned about ways to boost the opens, I mean, to be honest, I'm still sort of all digesting this. As I say, I certainly haven't viewed back all those recordings. They'll all be made available, and obviously we'd like you to collaborate with that as well. Have a look at those recordings and share your experience with them. There'll be lots of more comms to come. But there's thank you for picking up actually that. Yeah, glad you're looking over my shoulder at the notes, because I forgot to mention that it was inspired by the Spark position paper and they're connecting the open. So our keynote, well, hopefully it might even be up now. Have a look. And tell me if it is, but that was from Vanessa Bergman and Paula Corti from Spark Europe, and it's a really inspiring keynote before we had sort of these panel discussions, etc. But what did we learn? I mean, technology and infrastructure alone are insufficient, and communities are crucial. I mean, I guess we kind of know this already. I mean, that's why we're all here, right, in Manchester, talking to our peers. You know, that is really important. But I think even more so with the communities we're working with, you know, it really came across strongly, you know, especially from colleagues working in countries that perhaps don't have the same level of infrastructure as we do have in the UK in terms of physical and technical infrastructure. And also that type of infrastructure is harder to break, right? You know, look at what's happened in America with the American administration. You can destroy technical infrastructure, you can take things down. People are much more resilient, and I think that's something that perhaps we don't have enough investment into, you know, often funding as such. I was thinking about this quite a lot recently, but when I started in this area sort of 10, 15, 20 years ago, just had really good community support. These things come and go, and communities sort of atomise and fragment, and I think that's something we really need to focus on. So yeah, those communities are crucial in trying to build across different jurisdictions. Knowledge must be recognised as a common good. Again, if this comes into this proprietary area, some of the stuff that Caroline was talking about, and really trying to build on it as a common good from different perspectives as well. You know, the different perspectives we got through the different people from different parts of the world was fascinating. The acts of co-creation and collaboration themselves are integral to counterbalance bias and exclusion. You know, these issues of bias and exclusion really difficult, especially politically. Again, I think in the environment that we're working in now, you know, equity isn't really valued, shall we say, by some of the political actors at the moment, especially in the face of AI, and you have the biases that are sort of propagated through that, and the fact that we need more, you know, diverse information in the ecosystem to start with to actually combat that bias, all of which comes from people, you know, not from AI, whatever Elon Musk might say. And obviously we've seen these pressures on higher education really requiring us to, you know, be more collaborative to support one another and to recognise these different open practices and break down these siloed approaches. I mean, certainly as an open research advisor at the University of Leeds, increasingly, since working with Ken, I tend to hang my advocacy now on knowledge equity. You know, I'm as guilty as anybody of sort of hanging it on policy, and you've got to do this for the ref, and you've got to meet the you know, and this is why you've got to do it, and getting the repository, which is still doing. But those are the sticks. But what are the whys? And really engaging people with those whys about what value of open knowledge is. So yeah, really that need to build resilient and open infrastructures, including human infrastructures, in the face of the turbulent politics that we're in and the evolving landscape which is there, I think, as well. And yeah, just the benefits of working with and learning from other knowledge professionals in different contexts. Again, at Leeds, in the past I've worked with in open educational resources. Now I've worked in open access and open data. Tend to be a little bit siloed just because we've got time for, certainly I'm working in a very big institution, a big library, and actually finding the time to speak to colleagues. So I think we need to do more to bring that together, and that's certainly something we're looking at Leeds now. It brings everything together under this bannership of open scholarship and trying to collaborate a lot more, even within our institution, let alone outside it. Were you going to finish up, or was that it? So yeah, what?
Do you want me to do it?
What next?
So in terms of what next, we are going to still, and I'd really encourage you to as well, continue to engage with those recordings and contributions from the Knowledge Equity and Open Scholarship Week to try and synthesize them and apply what we learn. We're in early discussions about Knowledge Equity and Open Scholarship Week 2027, but we really want to broaden out the partnerships working on the organising groups for that. So not just rely on the same partners or even ourselves necessarily. We'd like to iterate the co-creation experiment again to see if something else interesting happens, and also potentially co-create even more of the programme in future, perhaps engaging those participants of the co-creation experiment in shaping next year's programme or subsequent years. So really just building on their what they have to say, basically. So it's all in development, isn't it, Nick? But that's, I think, everything that we wanted to share. So thank you for listening, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you.
Yeah.